Alright guys, it is that time of the year. With just 1 week until the new championship campaign gets underway, it's time to put my neck on the line and bring to you my championship predictions for the upcoming season. Before we jump into anything, it is worth pointing out, don't take these predictions too seriously. We are predicting the most unpredictable league in the world after all, and we can all expect plenty of twists and turns throughout the season. I also want you guys to put your neck on the line in the comments down below. Do leave your predictions, your 1 to 24s. We got a bunch to go over in today's video, and without any further ado, let's jump in. At the bottom of the table, I have gone for Sheffield Wednesday. It does feel like a bit of a popular consensus at the moment with a lot of the other predictions that I've seen so far, but comparing Wednesday's squad as of recording to some of the other teams who I think will be in and around the relegation battle, they just seemed a little bit underbaked at this point in time. They're obviously coming off the back of a terrific League One campaign, a dramatic playoff, semi-final and final win in the end, but compared to the other promoted sides, Wednesday do feel considerably behind at this point. The departure of Darren Moore also wasn't ideal because Wednesday do have a squad which is built to play his sort of football, and Xisco will look to make his own twist on things. Xisco has shown previously at championship level what he can do with the right bunch of players in the right environment, but this Sheffield Wednesday project just feels totally night and day compared to what he walked into at Watford. Wednesday do have plenty of experienced heads to rely upon right now, but the depth and quality are two major sticking points that I can't get away with at the moment with Wednesday. Things could change over the next few weeks in the transfer window, of course, but as things stand, I've got them down as the weakest side. 23rd place, I have gone for QPR. Now, in the second half of last season, QPR were, by far and away the worst team in the championship, along with Reading, in terms of the points they accumulated in the second half of the season. Ainsworth came in towards the end and did get them over the line, although they still looked unconvincing under him. My issue with QPR right now is I still see them being quite leaky at the back. Last season, they conceded 71 goals, the second worst defensive record in the championship. I'm not sure the likes of Asmir Begovic and Morgan Fox massively go ahead and turn that sort of record around. Now, I have seen some positive glimpses of QPR in pre-season where it does look as if Ainsworth is willing to be a little bit more adaptable this season in terms of the play style, which I think is promising. And QPR's saving grace this season could well be Ilias Chair and Chris Willock, who are still at the club. I thought they'd be off by this point in time, but on their day, QPR have got two of the best creative assets in the championship on their hands. However, QPR showed last season that when the momentum goes against them, they can absolutely drop like a stone, and when a team's got that sort of thing in them, it does make me worried that a similar run couldn't happen in this upcoming season. In 22nd place, and as my final relegation spot, I have gone for Rotherham. I didn't really want to put Rotherham down after they beat the drop last season, but comparing where their squad is right now in comparison to the teams that I've got surviving, I just think Rotherham are a little bit more behind. Under Matt Taylor, Rotherham averaged 1 point per game in the championship last season, and considering Rotherham's squad is arguably weaker at this stage than it was last season, I feel like they could be a victim of the drop this season, especially with it being a more competitive league at the bottom of the table this time. I still think creativity is a bit of an issue for this Rotherham squad last season. Only Reading had a lower XG than they did in the championship. What they do have is arguably one of the best goalkeepers in the league in Victor Johansson, but I'm not sure if his magic is enough to keep them up again this season. 21st place and just surviving, I've gone for Huddersfield. Now, at the end of last season, I was a lot higher on Huddersfield than I am right now. With Warnock at the helm, the momentum they ended last season, I thought there was the real possibility for them to properly kick on in this upcoming season. But it's not quite transpired that way in the summer so far. And I think going through that Huddersfield team right now, with the lack of incomings, you can still pick quite a few holes in either end of the pitch. Warnock definitely has it in him to work his magic, but as the squad stands right now, I'm not sure it's good enough to properly push on. As of recording, the only signings so far are the likes of Chris Maxwell and Tom Edwards, and it just feels as if more is needed if they want to push on to that next level. In 20th place, I've gone for Plymouth. Now, having kept a close eye on Plymouth over these last few weeks in the transfer market, it does feel as if it is a club heading in the right direction. Let's not get it twisted, this is a very streetwise squad who won League One last season and have added well to their squad so far for this upcoming championship campaign. Getting Ballymumba and Morgan Whittaker both back on a permanent basis was was brilliant business by Plymouth, particularly because they've not overspent on either player. They smartly utilised the loan and European market so far as well, and with a few more additions expected to come in over these next few weeks, I think they'll have enough to beat the drop this year. In 19th place, I have gone for Cardiff. It's tough to make a proper call on Cardiff right now. It's hard to make much of a judgment on Errol Balut, for example, having never seen him in English football before. There is a chance for Cardiff to properly push on this year. My uncertainty with them comes because of the high turnover of managers and ideas from last season, and I'm worried if that will be a reoccurring pattern coming into this season. You know, at one point it felt like they were heading in the right direction under Morrison, but one bad run of form and suddenly he was shown the door. There is still that underlying feeling of unpredictability within Cardiff. But with that being said, I do think they've recruited pretty well, especially considering they have been under a transfer embargo. Goals were a huge problem for Cardiff last season, but they have added to that department with the likes of Ugbo, Grant and Mayte coming in to help them out in the goal scoring areas. Aaron Ramsey will also get more fans on side for this season, although I do think the club will have to carefully monitor his minutes. So not a huge jump overall from Cardiff, but a slight improvement on last season for me. Next up, I've gone for Hull. Now this one could be a bit harsh, and by the end of the season could come back to bite me. Originally, when I first put together the table, I did have Hull significantly higher up, but a couple of factors recently have just led to me dropping them down ever so slightly. Originally, I thought this could be a season where Hull really kicked on from their finish last season, but it seems as if the club is taking a bit more of a balanced approach to their spending this season following the big splurge they had last summer, and given the overall quality of the league going up, I do have Hull slightly lower than last season. The squad is really competitive for this level, and they're going to need to keep key players fit this season. It was a bit of a problem they had last year, but so far I'm just not totally convinced that their recruitment stacks up with some of the other sides who finished around them last season, who I'm predicting will just move on to that next level. I really like Liam Rosenior as a coach as well. I think Hull should stick with him long term. Originally when he took over, he had a great run of results with this squad, but it is worth pointing out that 9 of Hull's last 16 games last season did end as draws, and I have a feeling that that draw-heavy nature next season could potentially cost them from properly kicking up the league. The loss of Carl Darlow is a big blow in my opinion, and I'm still not convinced that there's enough goals in that squad to properly push on to the next level. Liam Delap could well prove me wrong, but having watched him quite a bit last season, I'm yet to be convinced. I do feel as if this is as low as Hull would probably go, and for that reason it is probably a bit of a harsh prediction, but from a few of the comments from the owner recently, it just feels like this summer will be a little bit more sensible and about putting some more building blocks in place rather than properly propelling up the league and going for the playoffs or something like that. Next up, I've gone for my side, North End. Now I do hope I'm proven wrong with this one, but I do have Preston falling several places from our finish last season in what's going to be a hugely competitive season. I don't think Preston can afford to take our usual mid-table standing for granted. Now we finished mid-table last season largely to our defensive record, however even that started to show signs of cracks in the second half of last season. From January onwards we conceded 1.6 goals per game, which isn't good. We also really struggled against the top sides, and I think that that problem could continue into this season unless Lowe becomes a little bit more flexible. 21% of our points last season came against sides who were ultimately relegated, and we did really struggle against the sides who finished above us. With the rest of the league becoming stronger this year, I do fear that we could slightly fall behind the curve. The biggest problem I still have with this Preston squad, despite our recruitment so far, is goals. I think with Emile Rees and Ched Evans each coming off the back of huge injury layoffs, you know, they've each missed the entirety of pre-season, there's no telling how long it will take either of them to fully get back up to speed. I do think we've had a strong summer transfer window so far, which should keep us clear of any relegation fears, but there's still some deficiencies in this team for me when compared to the rest of the Championship. Leighton Stewart is one I'm excited about, but maybe a player for the future, and Will Keane will chip in with a few goals here and there. I like the additions of Calvin Ramsey and Dwayne Holmes, who I think add a little bit more to the squad. But the player that I'm most excited about is Mads Frøykaar Jensen, but I think we will need to be patient with him as a fan base. He scored a couple of worldies in pre-season, but it's worth remembering that Emile Rees took a full Championship season to adapt to this level. when he was coming over from Denmark, and I feel like Jensen will probably have those patches of inconsistency while he continues to adapt. I do think if we were to sign Tom Cannon on loan for the season, then I would bump us up a few places, but right now with this squad I think we'll be lower mid-table. I worked it out last season and Cannon's goals in the second half of the season actually won us 9 points, and without those 9 points we would have finished 16th on 54 points, and it's around that region of the table that I currently have this squad finishing. After that I have gone for Birmingham. Now I really like the travel of direction with Birmingham right now, and I've gone for a slight improvement on last season. It's an ownership that's willing to back the manager, and they have made some really savvy signings so far this season. Don't get me wrong, they are still lacking quite a few components for me that would see them properly pushing up the league, but we could still see them bringing in those players over these next few weeks, and number 9 probably most definitely is still needed. The only real reservation I have with this Blues squad right now is the fact that they have lost Chong and they no longer have Trusty, and while their recruitment has been good, it is worth pointing out that the likes of Keshi Anderson, Tyler Roberts, Koji Mayoshi, and I suppose you could chuck Christian Bielik into this group as well, have all had suspect injury records over the last few years, and I do worry if Birmingham might get a pile-up of injuries at some point of the season with a few of those players. I do really like the addition of Siriki Dembele, although he didn't play that much football last season or even the season before, and I think knitting together a full new squad will take a little bit of time. Almost similar to how Hull did last season, it took them quite a while to knit together a completely new 11. I feel like Birmingham may have a slow start and gradually grow into the season as it goes along. After that we do have a faller from last season. It may be a little bit bold, but I have gone for Watford. This one could blow back in my face, but I do have a few doubts over them at the moment. They finished 11th in the Championship last season, and with their squad weaker now than it was last season, I do have them having a slight fall off. Making a realistic prediction with Watford is near impossible though, given the trigger happy nature when it comes to managers at that club. We all know that if Ishmael doesn't work out over the first few months, then he will probably be gone, and God knows who will come in next. But a manager like Ishmael needs to be afforded time to bring in his style of play, and whether or not he'll be afforded that at Watford I think is impossible to say. There has been a huge summer clear out so far, and don't get me wrong, that was probably needed. 12 first team players have left, and they've largely been reliant upon loanees and free transfers to plug the gaps. The biggest problem I probably have with Watford right now would relate to goal scoring. Joao Pedro, Ismail Assar and Keenan Davis contributed towards 50% of the goals Watford scored last season, and none of them are there right now. I do, however, see a world where if Ishmael is given time, he could get something out of this team, and a manager like Ishmael is probably better working with a collective rather than a group of individuals, and it felt like that was what Watford were last season. But I'm just not fully convinced that he'll be afforded that time, and with the squad still lacking in a few areas of quality, I have them dropping off from last year. After that, I've gone for Blackburn. Now, Rovers are a bit of an impossible one to call right now, with a bit of an uncertain financial situation at the club, with it being reported that budgets have been cut. They're looking to sell players before they bring them in. It's tough to see them improving on last season's finish right now. Now, Blackburn had a huge tail off in form in the second half of last season, and that did sort of coincide with Ben Brereton Diaz dropping off in form. He's no longer at the club, and looking over their squad right now, the biggest weakness I see in it is the lack of goals in the final third. New additions Ennis and Sigurdsson both look likely to miss the start of the season through injury. I think that's a blow, given it's usually Blackburn who start the season really well, and that's what sort of keeps them in contention for the whole year. If they get off to a bit of a slower start this season, I do worry that they'll have a bit of a drop off. Now, I do like the makeup of the rest of the squad. I think they've got some exceptional youngsters coming through at the moment, but with some uncertainty behind the scenes and even relating to the manager, it does lead to some concern. To be fair though, if Jon Dahl Tomasson does stick around for the entire season, he is the sort of manager that can get a lot out of a little, and I have been guilty of underestimating Blackburn in the past. Rovers were near the bottom of plenty of underlying statistics last season, but Jon Dahl Tomasson still had them challenging in and around the top 6 up until the final day. With everything going on at the club right now though, I do have them as a regressing side from last season. Are we finally starting to see some signs of progress at Stoke City? I do have them improving on last season's finish. Now, it is a massive rebuilding job that Alex Neil is undertaking at Stoke at the moment. Plenty of incomings, outgoings and still still more business which is yet to be done with that Stoke squad. They've pretty much signed half of North End side from 2018 so far. Stoke are another side who somewhat remind me of Hull from last season, not quite at the same scale, but that big overall rebuilding job going on right now. I really like some of the additions that they have made, getting Ben Pearson back on a permanent basis. The two loanees from Wolves I think are really exciting, and I think that DJ perhaps gives them something extra in the final third as well. I think Alex Neil's putting together a squad that has really solid foundations for the Championship. The loan addition of Mark Travers, for example, I think is a really solid capture on loan for the season from Bournemouth. So I think this will be an improvement from Stoke, albeit I don't think they've quite got it in them to bridge that top half region just yet. Next up, and in 12th place, I have gone for Bristol City. Now, under Nigel Pearson, Bristol City have been the epitome of slow and steady progress. If you look at Bristol City's league finishes under Pearson, season upon season, they finish a couple places higher and just continue that overall rebuild. Don't get me wrong, there have been some hugely frustrating moments along the way and there have been some low points, but overall it feels like the club is slowly creeping in the right direction. I think we all expect them to probably lose Alex Scott, but if they do, they'll receive a huge chunk of money from that. And I've also really liked the look of some of their business so far. They've got some good youngsters pushing through, and it's a squad which is fairly competent at both ends of the pitch for me. Albeit not quite yet with the sort of quality to properly challenge the top six, but I see another steady progression from last season. After that, it is time for West Brom. Now, had everything behind the scenes been totally normal at the Hawthorns this summer, I'd be probably backing them for a top six push right now. Carlos Corberán had them performing like a top six outfit last season, and had it not been for that poor start under Steve Bruce, they probably would have made it in the end. Uncertainty behind the scenes makes this one a really hard prediction though, with potentially more sales still to come later down the line in the summer. It's difficult to see what that West Brom squad will be looking like come the start of the window. There's not been much business done so far, and I get the feeling that West Brom will probably be reliant on the loan market to bulk up the rest of their squad. But with that being said, it is still a very competent squad for Championship level. They still have a number of top performers in there for the Championship who are more than capable of cutting it in the top half. Really rate Corberán as a manager as well, so despite the uncertainty, I have West Brom sort of middle of the road right now, which is me sort of hedging my bets with them. Into the top 10 we go, and in 10th place I have gone for Swansea. It's where they finished last season. Felt like under Russell Martin, Swansea was slowly building in the right direction. Certainly ended last season with a bit of a flourish in terms of their league form, but now with Martin leaving and Duff coming in, it's all a bit of an unknown at Swansea right now. Have to admit, I am really excited about what Duff could potentially do with this Swansea squad, given his excellent record almost immediately at Barnsley last season, the state of affairs he walked into at Oakwell, and how he immediately sort of changed around the culture at that club. I think there's a real potential for Swansea and Duff to be a hit this season. The recruitment for Swansea so far has been quite concise and targeted, with the incomings of Josh Key, Josh Ginnelly and Jerry Yates. Now, the big one for Swansea, which may determine the success of this season or not, is the future of Joel Perreault. If he does end up leaving, how much money does Swansea get for him, and then how much of that money is then reinvested into the rest of the squad? That's the only real sticking point I've got with Swansea at the moment, because it is such an unknown right now. But all in all, if they get a few more targets over the line, I think that Duff has got something in him to have Swansea in the round, the top six. Coming in 9th place, I've then gone for Ipswich Town. A lot of hype around Ipswich right now, and I think rightly so. The sort of football they were playing in League One last season, the recruitment so far this summer, and the potential of Kieran McKenna, and just a club of that size really coming back up to the Championship, the infrastructure they have and everything like that. A lot of things pointing towards Ipswich continuing on this progressive build under Kieran McKenna, and I really think there's the chance that they leapfrog several of the mid-table Championship sides from last season. You only have to look at their recruitment so far to see just how ambitious they have actually been. Love the addition of Jack Taylor and Amari Hutchinson on loan. They got Josh Hurst back on a permanent basis, and there's still the potential for more business to happen with this Ipswich squad right now. Preston played Ipswich in a pre-season friendly, and I know you can never read too much into pre-season, but thought Ipswich looked really quite slick in that game, full of energy, and that's what I'm expecting of them this season. I know they've been tipped by a lot of people so far, but I do think that Ipswich will catch a lot of Championship sides by surprise this year. In 8th place and just missing out on the playoffs, I have gone for Millwall. It's felt like Millwall have been there or thereabouts in the playoff chase under Gary Rowett for the past few years now, but they've just never quite been able to get over the line. I've got a similar feeling that this season may unfold in a similar manner. Now, Millwall, I think, have done some excellent business so far. Loved the additions of Joe Bryan, Kevin Nisbet, Casper Denora, and I think that Wes Harding's a solid backup option for them at the back. As of recording, they've not lost any major players yet, although there is still interest in Zian Fleming. I think the future of Fleming will be quite important for Millwall and where they end up finishing. The goalkeeping department is an area where they could do with ironing out. They have been targeting a few goalkeepers so far, with a few doubts over George Long perhaps, but nothing's quite materialised. But I think with the sensible additions they've made so far, Millwall will be there or thereabouts again, albeit I've just got them falling short. 7th place and just missing out on the top 6, I've then gone for Norwich City. Now, I'm still a little bit conflicted over this prediction because Norwich could be in a range of different places in this league table, and when I was sort of coming up with this one, placing the teams in order and things like that, Norwich are a side who have jumped about all sorts of places over the last week or so for me, but I've settled on around about 7th for them at the moment. There's no denying that they ended last season on a tragic run of form, and David Wagner, I think, needs to get off to a good start this season for Norwich to properly prove that he is the right man to take them forward. There was a spell when he originally came in where it looked like things were clicking for Norwich, but way too much inconsistency last season in what was a huge underachievement by their own standards. Now, they have lost some big players, but running an eye over their probably strongest starting 11 for next season, I still think the talent is there in that squad to be there or thereabouts in the playoff chase. They've added fairly well to their squad so far, utilised the free agent market, adding the likes of Ashley Barnes and Jack Stacey especially, who I think will be good pickups. And then someone like Christian Fashnacht for a decent transfer fee who could give them that little bit of stardust. I still think there's more to come from Sarah and Nunes especially. And if the pieces do fall into play, Norwich could be there or thereabouts, but given the underperformance last season, I'm still slightly wary. Coming in 6th place and sneaking into the playoffs, I have gone for Sunderland once again. Now, Sunderland were a brilliant watch, especially in the second half of last season, and it's worth remembering that yes, while they have lost Amad Diallo and his importance to that side in making the playoffs last season was absolutely vital, there are still some key components in there that for me mean Sunderland will be there or thereabouts once again. Let's not forget, Sunderland made the top 6 last season when they had a real injury crisis. They had fullbacks playing as centre halves, they had wingers playing as wing backs, everyone was sort of out of position. But even despite that chaos going on with all the injuries they had, especially in that defensive line, they were still capable of some fantastically fluid football. When you potentially add Ross Stewart back into the equation for this next upcoming season, I think there's a lot of goals to be had with that Sunderland front line. Jack Clark's still there right now, and I think that he'll only go on to improve from his numbers last season, which were already really impressive. I really do think that there's enough attacking quality already within that Sunderland squad to cover for the loss of Diallo, and with defenders returning from injury and with Sunderland having already added to that position with some really promising youngsters as well, I think it'll be another really exciting season for Sunderland where they will be there or thereabouts. In the final few months of last season, Sunderland probably were my favourite side to watch, with how dynamic that forward three could be and how flexible it could be at times. And I think the experience that young group of players would have got from making the playoffs last season will be absolutely vital to their chances this season. Coming in 5th place, I've then gone for Coventry. Now, my perspective on Coventry has flipped quite a bit over the last 3 or so weeks, certainly since the start of the transfer window. As soon as Coventry lost that playoff final, I was a little bit worried for them because they were more than likely to lose Gyökeres and Gustavo Hamer. Obviously, Gyökeres has already left, but the way in which Coventry have gone about rebuilding and investing into their squad with the Gyökeres money, I think will place them really well for next season. Now, it's difficult to make a definitive call on Coventry right now because we don't know the future of Gus Hamer, and I'd say that he is probably more integral to their chances next season than Gyökeres would have been. I actually think they've replaced Gyökeres fairly well with the addition of Ellis Sims. And so what the future holds for Hamer may have a bearing on what I make of Coventry come the end of the window, but as things stand right now, the additions they've made so far, some really savvy pickups from Europe, I think there's more potential for this Coventry squad where goals will be scored from all over the pitch. They'll have a returning Callum O'Hare coming back into the side this season as well, which could be absolutely massive for them. And after all he's achieved over these last few years at Coventry, I just can't doubt Mark Robins anymore. It's been year-on-year progression for Coventry under Robins, and I've got them in another playoff finish here, which would represent another great season. Coming in 4th place, I've then gone for Leeds United, expecting a little bit of playoff drama from Leeds this season. Now with Leeds, it's tough to make a definitive call on them right now without knowing what their squad will look like come the end of the transfer window. They've only made one addition so far, albeit I think a brilliant signing in Ethan Ampadu, both for now making an impact this season in the Championship and going forward into the future. But generally speaking, Leeds haven't actually lost as many first team players by this point as I thought would be the case. Obviously Rodrigo's left, and then they've then had quite a few big earners going out on loan, the likes of Mark Rocker and Brendan Arrington being amongst the main stars leaving, and I'm sure there will be more departures to come. But even going through the quality in that Leeds squad right now, stacking it up to other sides who I think they will be up against in the Championship, I think under a manager like Daniel Farke, there is a lot of fun to be had, especially when you add in some of the youngsters who were out on loan in the Championship last season, who Leeds will be able to use this season. I think there's quite a bit of fun to be had in that side. I still have a few fears over defensive stability under a manager like Farke, with how shaky they were in that area in the Premier League last season. I think they will score a lot of goals and be a lot of fun to watch. And it may be a little bit of a bumpy ride over the first few months of the season as Farke works things out. Still feels like they're a little bit behind in recruitment compared to some of the other sides who they were relegated with, and I think there will be more additions to come later in the window. But I still think looking at the quality of that Leeds squad, it has the potential to click in under a manager like Farke, who's won the league twice previously with Norwich. There's still a hell of a lot of potential with that Leeds squad. Coming in 3rd place and just missing out on automatic promotion, I'm then going for Middlesbrough. Now Borough are somewhat of a tough call right now for a couple of reasons. Would I say this Middlesbrough squad right now in the starting 11 is as strong as last season? Probably not, no. I think a lot of the additions that they've made so far this summer have been with the future in mind. You know, I'm not sure how much those new signings are going to make an immediate impact in this Borough squad, but I think they'll serve them well in the long run. Why I've put Borough 3rd though is because I do have faith that they will continue to add between now and the end of the window. We saw how well they utilised the loan market last season, for example, and typically we find it's the case where those high quality Premier League loans are only really made available to leave their Premier League clubs towards the end of the window, and I assume that Middlesbrough will be at the top of the pecking order to snap up a few of those. The other reason I'd have Borough 3rd right now is my faith in Michael Carrick, really. He showed last season that he's capable of getting his side up and around automatic promotion form. That's how he had Middlesbrough playing for the vast majority of last season. And just in general, I still think it's a really strong spine of players. While they have lost that little bit of stardust that Archer, Giles and Ramsey provided last season, there's still the basis of a side that's good enough to get into the top 6. What will be the determining factor between Middlesbrough properly kicking on maybe from this place into automatic promotion territory will be what they do in the final few weeks of the transfer window. Coming in 2nd place, I am going for Southampton at this stage. I have to admit, I am absolutely amazed by just how many first team players Southampton have managed to hold on to until this point of the window. And if Southampton were to go into this new Championship season with all those players still there, you know, none of them are going to leave between now and the end of the window, let's say that'll be the case, there's no doubt in my mind that the Saints have one of the strongest squads in the league right now. My only real concern comes from the fact that it's Russell Martin coming in with a very specific type of football, and as he's shown at Swansea previously, Southampton might be a bit of a slow burner this season while that team gets to grips with how Martin wants them to play. The reason I think Southampton's promotion push will be at a far superior level to anything we've seen with Martin previously at Swansea in the Championship is just because there's a lot more quality in that Southampton squad compared to what he was working with at Swansea. I think Russell Martin's almost boosted by the fact that he is walking into a very young group of players. They're almost quite malleable in a way, all willing to learn. And and some of the players they have in that squad who maybe weren't quite capable of thriving at Premier League level have already shown their capabilities at this level to be absolutely fantastic. The likes of Adam Armstrong, Nathan Teller, Che Adams, James Bree, who was fantastic for Luton. But to come in and win the Championship, I am going with the favourites. I am going with Leicester City. Now, opposite to Southampton, Leicester have lost some big stars so far. The likes of James Maddison, Harvey Barnes, Yuri Tielemans, amongst others, have all left so far. But the vibes I'm getting from this Leicester squad at the moment, with the way I'm expecting them to play under Maresca, I am getting similar vibes to sort of Burnley this time last year, albeit not quite at the same scale of the overall rebuild. But there is still a hell of a lot of quality within that Leicester City side, and when you go over that team, it shouldn't be a Championship outfit. With the players they've added on top of that as well, the likes of Harry Winks, Connor Cody, who are more than good enough to be still cutting it in the Premier League, Championship experience in someone like Callum Doyle, who was absolutely excellent on loan last season with Coventry. They've sorted out their goalkeeping department with a goalkeeper who fits into the style that Maresca is going to be looking to play in this season. I think just so many of the factors point towards Leicester being the outright stronger side this season that at this stage I think it'd be a bit foolish to back against them. There is still a question mark over them, of course, with Maresca being a fairly unknown quantity as a number one, and the fact that, let's not get it twisted, that dressing room culture behind the scenes at Leicester last season did look a little bit toxic, and that will need to be sorted out, because if they're going to rock up to the Championship and think they're going to walk it, they'll be in for a rude awakening. Overall though, I do have them as the strongest outfit right now, and as you can see to the side of me, those are my Championship predictions for the upcoming season. Now, until the transfer window goes ahead and shuts, it's difficult to make a definitive statement on all of these sides. There could still be a hell of a lot of movement between now and the end of the window. You know, Sheffield Wednesday could go on and sign about 15 players and my thoughts would completely change on them. Where I'm standing right now though is I genuinely believe that anyone from about 18th upwards in my prediction could feasibly be in with a shout of a top 6 finish, and I could probably be convinced by it by one of you guys in the comments down below. I think it's going to be that open of a league this season. But that will go ahead and wrap it up from me, guys. I want to hear from you now in the comments down below. It's time for you to go ahead and stick your necks on the line. I will be returning to some of your comments come the end of the season, so it won't just be me with egg left on my face. But I'd like to hear from you in terms of where I've placed your team. Do you agree, disagree, think you'll be slightly higher or lower? At the end of the day, football is a game full of opinions, and I want to hear from you. Don't take it too personally if I did put your side slightly lower than you think they'll be. At the end of the day, it's all just for a little bit of fun. Apart from that though, guys, that will now wrap it up for today's video. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you did go on to enjoy, please do leave a like and stay tuned for some more Championship content coming out next week. And I'll see you all in the next one.